Think Outside the Lines is a space for anyone ready to stop checking boxes, to step off autopilot, and create the life you actually want, with clarity, intention, and alignment. Whether you're questioning the default path, rebuilding from scratch, or just looking to feel a little more like yourself. My guest today looked like she had it all. A high-powered corporate career leading teams, a beautiful home, a partner, the whole picture of success. Then she came home one day and discovered the life she was living was built on a lie, and that the exhaustion she had been ignoring, right down to the shingles on her face, had been her body trying to warn her all along. Today, she's a best-selling author, keynote speaker, and coach who helps people unsubscribe from everything that no longer fits. Join me as we think outside the lines with Ginny Priem. So, Ginny, in our back and forth, prior to this interview, you said something that really resonated with me. You said that creating the life you want isn't about blowing everything up. It's about paying attention to what feels off and having the courage to adjust even before you have certainty about what comes next. I personally think that that's a really important sentiment to guide our conversation today, because it's very much how I see the world as well. And I think a lot of people assume that they have to make radical changes to improve their lives. And in some cases that might be true, but in most cases, change can happen gradually and actually be more effective as a result. So I think your story is really relatable to a lot of people listening. You were high performing, leading teams, life looked great on paper, but so many of us, it wasn't. So tell me more about your journey that led to this moment.
Oh my gosh.
That's a lot.
Well, thank you for that. No, it's so good. And it's interesting because I think there's a line in my newest book that my sister actually underlined and sent to me. And it was that similar sentiment. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it's something about change can feel really overwhelming and big, but slowly and gradually, when you make small changes, then all of a sudden that transformation can feel big. And so I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make these radical changes. And trust me, I have made some radical changes in my life, and it all stems from a story of me coming home one day to find out that my partner and his two kids that were living in my house, that he was living a double life. He was not who I thought he was at all. He is a fraud in every level. I was being taken advantage of physically, financially, psychologically, emotionally, mentally, in every way. And it was at that point that you're referring to, it was my life imploding in that moment that made me finally start to look at how I was living. Was I living authentically? The answer is no. And what were those choices that kind of led up to that? And on the outside, everything looked great. To what you were saying, I had the big fancy corporate job. I looked successful on the outside to everybody else, right? The house, the two kids, the partner, the dogs, basically everything looked great from the outside, but I was tired and exhausted on the inside. And there were signs that I was ignoring and I wasn't paying attention to. And so we can get to that in a little bit. I was the one that was working the job. I was traveling for work. I was paying the bills, making sure the house was clean. I was making sure the lawn was mowed. I was doing school pickup and drop off and packing lunches and doing the grocery shopping and the cooking and the laundry.
Wow.
Everything. And still trying to maintain friendships and a rigid workout schedule for self-care. But inside, I was just completely falling apart.
So when you look back, what do you think it was that your body was trying to tell you that maybe your mind wasn't ready to hear?
That there was a psychopath living in my house. If I'm being frank, the signs for me were, sometimes I think our minds and our bodies tell us things before our hearts can catch up, or maybe our bodies are screaming at us, in my case, before our minds can catch up. So for me, how that presented is I had precancerous skin lesions removed. I had my hair all breaking off and falling out, and I couldn't understand why. And at the peak of it, when I knew in my bones, in my soul, that something was really wrong, was when I developed shingles on my face in my 30s. And that is something that I know it presents on your skin, but what it is actually an attack on your nervous system. And unfortunately, where I got it, fortunately and unfortunately, lucky for me, I worked in the aesthetics industry for almost 2 decades. And I was able to call one of my dermatologist friends, and she got me in right away the next morning. And she explained that, Ginny, if you hadn't come in and caught this early, you could have gone blind.
Oh my God.
So it follows your nervous system. So already like this half of my face, the whole right side of my forehead, my eye area was completely swollen. And
Wow.
it was already traveling down my nerve path. There's more starting to form. So these are the ways for me that it showed up. But I think even for people, if you're really unhappy in your job and every morning on your drive to work, you're getting stomach cramps and having an upset stomach, or every time you have to get together with that family member, you have digestive
Or that
issues or you get a
friend.
migraine. Or that toxic friend,
Yeah.
right? Like, I will unsubscribe to shitty friends in a
Yeah.
millisecond, but that takes a lot of introspection, a lot of work
Yeah.
to get to that point.
So you were navigating a psychologically and emotionally abusive relationship while performing at a high level professionally. How were you able to keep those two realities separate for so long? And I do want to talk a bit about how you found out and we'll get to that, but how were you doing it?
I think I was operating on autopilot.
Yeah.
I think I was so used to I like to use the word, this is one of the words that people are telling me that they relate to so much in the new book, is this over functioning. Right? It's this over functioning where you're just so used to doing it all,
Yeah.
it becomes the norm. And I think we live in a society where hustle culture
Yeah.
is praised, and the first person in the office and the last person to leave the office, you're not getting any awards for that. I think this whole idea of success is linear. You work the hardest, you work the longest, you get the promotion, you get the title, you get the salary increase, and then rinse and repeat.
Yep.
I think that's just such an outdated thing. I think the idea is it's not anymore this idea of more. It's actually about less with intention. Because when we're all so busy all of the time, we don't actually have the space or the opportunity to focus on what actually matters.
Yes to all of that. I think that's a lot of why I'm doing this show again. It's because I've been a part of that world in that culture, and now that I'm out of it, I get to observe it from a different perspective. And we overuse the word toxic, I think, right? But it's toxic and it's bad for your health. It's bad for your emotional stability. It's bad for your interpersonal relationships. There's so many different levels on which it's just hurting people. And I want to have conversations with people like yourself about that. One of the interesting things that you brought up is that, and I was talking about this in another conversation with someone the other day. I grew up in the school of Oprah. And one of the things that she always used to say was, the universe starts to whisper and it just progressively gets louder until it turns into a scream eventually. And by the time it's a scream, it's the shingles on your face, or it's something that it's forcing you to pay attention in ways that you weren't willing to before. And so I guess my question for you from all of that is, was it the shingles, or was there another point at which you realized that something was wrong, even if you weren't ready to act yet?
So there were several things that were red flags in that relationship that I chose to ignore because I was being gaslit. I was being manipulated. When I would bring something up, he would use DARVO, which is a psychology term that we use when we refer to narcissism. So they'll deny, attack, and then reverse the victim and offender, and somehow bring up something completely unrelated and flip whatever the issue of their behavior or the thing that they did, and then bring something in completely unrelated and try to blame you for bringing up the argument. And it really messes with your psyche. There's a couple of scenarios that I can think of that happened. But for me, when I was ignoring my intuition, what ended up happening is it's only stronger now. It's made me trust myself even more now today, which is great because I made that choice, because I realized that all of those times that my intuition was telling me something, it was right.
Yeah.
So once your intuition tells you something and you ignore it and it was right, you'll never not listen again. But where the story really started to unfold for me is about a month after I got shingles. I was coming home from a work trip from Birmingham, Alabama, and one of my friends she texted me and said, "Hey, what time do you land tonight?" And I said, 9:37 p.m. Why? And she's like, "Can you meet for a cocktail?" And I was like, at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night?
Don't test me with
I
again.
love a cocktail and wine just about every day. But in the middle of the night on a Tuesday. Like I tease all the time. I'm a grandma. I like Wheel of Fortune, going to bingo and being in bed by 9.
There you go. Love
Like
it.
this is the ideal life for me. So I go and I meet her, but all day I'm thinking, what is going on?
It's a
What
weird
is so
request to not give more
big?
context, right?
Yeah, and I asked her, I was like, "Is everything okay?" And she said it will be. And so everything is going through my mind. Like, does she have cancer? Is she terminally ill?
Yeah.
Is something wrong with her family? What's going on and happening with her? And how do I show up and be a good supportive friend?
Yeah.
And I arrive and she's sobbing, has an empty drink and a stack of papers in front of
Oh
her.
no. Then you realize it's
And
not about her. It's about you.
Yeah, it was about, I named him Chad. It was about Chad, who was at home in my house with the 2 kids. And that was the turning point where it was just stacks of evidence that he was not who I thought he was at all. It was cheating, literally living a double life. He was abusing and neglecting my kids. He made up that one of his kids had brain cancer, just like abhorrent, unbelievable things.
Yeah.
He's a financial fraud. He pretends to be a doctor and performs chiropractic adjustments on people. He's not a doctor. So not only is it dangerous and he has harmed people, it's illegal. Just the list goes on and on. Those are just a few of the highlights as I'm looking at your shock face.
Yeah.
I came home, I confronted him. He denied, asked me if I believed it. And even at that point, I still didn't want to.
Yeah. Isn't that
I
amazing?
want to see.
There's something so fascinating about that because I want to go back like to the moment where you found out, right? So tell me like what that was like, but then I would love for you to expand on that a little bit because you had the evidence, right? You said your friend had stacks of papers and literally like documentation supporting her theory. And yet you're still like wanting to believe him. You're still like unsure. Talk about that because I think that your situation is obviously very specific, but I think that there's so many people that have been in a situation in their lives where as a victim, whereas, the perpetrator is essentially, no, don't believe your eyes. I can think of some things in real life that we're all experiencing right now.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm a very evidence-based
Yeah.
decision maker. I'm not an emotional decision maker, or for sure I wasn't back then.
Yeah.
I probably make a little bit more emotional decisions now because I trust myself so much more.
Yeah.
But I questioned everything that she said. So there was one time where she gave me a date, which is when I got the shingles on my face. And I said, no, we just got back from Italy and I'm certain I was home. And she said, I literally fact checked everything. Please open up your
Wow.
calendar and look at it again because I'm pretty sure you were in Florida for work. And I looked at my calendar and she was right.
Wow.
Because she went back, she verified dates, names, locations before she brought this evidence to me. Because imagine, right, being that person that's going to bring that information.
Yeah.
And she was terrified of how I was going to receive it. Was it going to end our friendship? Was I going to believe her? Was I going to think that she was just trying to ruin this family that I had with these 2 beautiful kids that I've fallen in love with that live in my house?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different dynamics. And that was the moment where I realized, oh, no, that was when I was in Florida. And that was when I got shingles on my face, when I knew in my bones and in my soul. And I came home, I confronted him, even on that trip when I got the shingles on my face, because I suspected that he was cheating. And he was. That was actually the date that I was able to get a hotel receipt from. And that was the pivotal moment. So once I had that piece of evidence, all I needed to know, Sean, was that one thing was true for it to all be true. And that was the turning point. And so he was out of my house by that weekend. But there have been some really beautiful things that have come out of it because I've made that choice, right? Like you can either choose to make your life better or you can become bitter. And to me, the only choice was to use this story to help other people. And that's what I've done. Since then, I've left my corporate job. I've become a best-selling author, just published my 3rd book. I'm a keynote speaker now, busier than I've ever been. I have my own podcast, which I'm so glad you're doing this show. Again, by the way, you're sharing some amazing stories and doing great work. It's very inspiring.
Thank you.
And then do coaching. So it's very, I think I'll never say that I'm thankful for him, or like I always say I'll never go so far as to thank him.
Yeah.
But I also am still very close with his children and his ex-wife. We call ourselves a modern family. We go on vacations together.
Oh,
We spend holidays together. We talk all the time. So there are some great things because those kids deserve two parents that love them
yeah.
and care for them unconditionally and that show up.
People obviously wouldn't be surprised that you left that relationship, but they probably were surprised that you walked away from your career. What made you realize that you need to leave both? I think the first one is more obvious than the other.
Yeah. For my sanity, for my health, that was very easy. That was a very easy decision for me to make to end the relationship. And then the corporate thing came later. I think it was this whole, as I went on this healing and evolving journey of my own. And it's not even that I evolved. I guess I did, but I think I returned to who I authentically was the entire time. But because of the people I'd surrounded myself with, these narcissistic people, I had this false sense of protective armor. And I had this kind of edge of toughness that wasn't really me. Like I am warm and soft and vulnerable. And I was hiding that for 40 years. And I think that's really sad. But this whole experience, like I'm a huge Brandi Carlile fan. I don't know if you know who
I
she
do,
is, but
yeah.
she's this massive musician. And her new album is called Returning to Myself. And I feel like that's what I did through this whole journey. And in that process, I realized that this corporate career was no longer fitting for who I was because my ideas of success changed. My ideas of healthy relationships changed. Everything for me changed. And so that no longer aligned either. And even today, I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I remember all of the meetings, like the pointless meetings that we would have just to fill our days. And now I'm like, I don't have to do that. I get to control my schedule and my calendar and decide what's meaningful and what matters, and then unsubscribe from the rest. And so the choice, ironically, was mine and wasn't mine at the same time. So at one point, I was just walking down my hallway, and it was like a unconscious thing, I guess. I literally just blurted out the words, "This is my last corporate job." That was in July of 2021, which is very weird. I always joke about it. I'm like, I said it to nobody but myself, but I wrote it down because that was so abnormal for me. And I
Yeah.
also had no idea what that looked like. I wasn't even in the process of completing and deciding to publish my first book yet. I'm still in this corporate job, performing at a high level, that last corporate job was actually really great. Like my boss at that time, she actually just came and stayed at my house this week
Aw.
while she was in town. And I've created some lifelong meaningful friendships. But it was the following year, it was after I published my first book, when our division of our company, we laid off half of the employees. And I saw the writing on the wall. We had this product that wasn't performing well. It was performing well. It actually worked, but it had adverse events that our company wasn't prepared to handle in the industry. They didn't have the experience in the industry to understand how to effectively work through the problems. Great product. But I saw the writing on the wall, and it was at that point when I hired a business coach, a speaking coach. I got all my coaching certifications, went through all the programs, got all the ICF accredited certifications, and started to build my plan. And then it was the following year when our company, they completely shut down our division. And fortunately for me, I had a position at a high enough level where I had a really nice runway, which afforded me the opportunity to make my exit and do the work that I do today, which is really meaningful and purposeful for me.
Yeah. I love that you spoke it to the universe, even if it was just to yourself when you said this will be my last corporate job. I think I had similar feelings at my last corporate gig too, where it's just this internal knowing it's okay when this doesn't work out, because inevitably it will not last forever. That's just the nature of corporate jobs these days. And I had a very similar experience, and I wasn't going back, and I wasn't going back to that. And I wasn't going back to those meetings that were booked to just waste time. I loved what you said about that too. So you described this as essentially the first time your outer life matched what you knew internally, which I loved. What did that alignment actually feel like after so many years of disconnection, essentially?
I think initially it was a little scary
Yeah.
because it's the first time when you're actually stepping into that full alignment, like inside matching outside. But I think when I started to know that it was right is when I started getting the book reviews coming in, because I had this whole I think you're conditioned, especially when you're surrounded by the types of people that I had been for my life, the people that I was picking to be closest to me that weren't actually supportive, that weren't actually cheering for you. I picked an industry that actually is like that. Like, it's insane the amount of support that I have from other speakers because there's this mindset of there's enough for all of us to go around. So we're going to actually help and support each other. And I wasn't used to that. And so I put up these protective measures, if you will, where I was like, when my book comes out, if I can just help one person, because then if
Just
you're
the
like,
one
if I
needs to
help
buy
one
it.
person,
Yeah.
yep, then I succeeded. That minimizing can be really problematic. But when I started to really know, and that inside and outside really started to match, was when people would write reviews and say how validating it was that they went through something similar or they went through something completely different, but it felt like it gave them permission to feel the way they felt about it. When people come up to me after a keynote and they're in tears and they start telling me about what they've been through, whether similar or something completely different, that's when I knew that everything was clicking into place.
There's something really interesting there because I've fallen victim to that mentality as well, where it's I'm doing this, and if it reaches one person, I can die happy or whatever. And it's no, actually, I want to reach like millions of people. I think I think I have something to say, and I think that my message is meaningful, and I hope to reach more than one person. Talk to me a little bit about that mindset shift, because I think that part of that in general is just like what can be terror, I think, for many people of walking away from a career without having a fully mapped plan. So what was the scariest part of that, and how did you bridge that? I don't know if it's like the mental, whatever you go through mentally to get from this is scary to I'm going to be okay.
You just have to start.
Yeah.
I think that so many of us that are creatives, that are creating content and creating work, we struggle with people pleasing and perfectionism, and we struggle with procrastination, waiting for it to be just right before we start. And I think about that. I'm like, man, if I would have waited until my podcast was great to start it, I still wouldn't have started. I actually tell people, I'm like, please don't go listen to the first 6 episodes. They're horrendous. They're so
Totally.
embarrassing. I scripted and I was overthought it.
Yeah.
So it's just start, because if you don't start, you're never going to get better. And it's good enough where it's at. And once you start, then it just keeps getting better. And so I think for me, I had to let go of some of those, the overthinking, the overanalyzing, the perfectionism. And now I surprise myself all the time. Like just last week, I thought that my podcast was a little stagnant, and it actually bumped up to the top 2% in the world.
Oh, amazing.
So,
Congrats.
thanks. But I think and then never stopping, right? You have to just keep going, because you never know when that next little break is going to happen. And I wouldn't have come up with unsubscribe if I had stopped. So it's the keep going, just like you would with anything else.
Yeah, I think momentum is obviously such a huge thing that I think we underestimate, because once you have it, it feels good to keep going, right? You don't get into that rut. The other thing I always like to tell people too that are like considering, because I have another friend right now that's working on some content related stuff. And I just say, you can film it, you can record it. You don't have to hit publish even, right? If you're not quite there yet, at least get familiar, like in a podcast studio, in front of a microphone, in front of a video camera, whatever that looks like for you, and you will get better. You don't have to hit publish on everything. There's absolutely things to your point, I wish that I never hit publish on, but even that, there's positive lessons that come out of it. So I love that.
And even find like a glimmer within that. If you create that content and say it's 30 minutes, find a minute or two of it that feels really good, and post that as a shorts or a reels or something, to just start getting comfortable with putting it out there.
Yeah, agreed. And I think also it's the realization that while you do want more than one person, hopefully, to hear it or see it, it's not going to be for everyone. And I think initially we put it out there thinking this has to be for everyone. Everyone has to like this. No, that's not necessarily true. You'll find your audience, you'll find your people eventually if you keep going. I think there's a belief that a lot of high performers carry, that if you work hard enough and you show up, that equals success. When did you personally start to realize that effort and alignment are really two completely different things?
Oh my gosh. It goes back to that hustle culture that we talked about. If everybody's busy, but not actually being productive, and you're too busy focusing on the wrong things, you're not focusing on what actually matters, what actually moves the needle. I think if everybody pulled out their calendar right now and you looked at the next 30 days, you could find something on there that you're dreading, that drains you, that's not actually meaningful and going to provide any value to your life, that you can completely remove or at least postpone.
Yeah.
Or swap it for something better. I think that we do things on autopilot. We do things because that's what society tells us, to be busy, to do this. And I'll tell you, like, slow mornings for me, to be able to get up in the morning, have my coffee. I think our definition, or for me anyway, of success has changed. My definition of success used to be, honestly, and this is so embarrassing to me to say now, was have a big salary, make a lot of money, drive a fancy car, have some expensive handbags, shoes, jewelry, and clothes. And that was my definition of success. And by definition, I was really successful. But to me, it's now time freedom. It's experiences, being able to travel, see new places, experience different cultures, different ways of living. Success to me is making a meaningful impact on other people's lives, inspiring them to be their best selves. So I think for me, that shift was in becoming more of who I am, aligning to a more ideal or aligned, authentic definition of success for me.
I love all of that so much, because I think that, especially as it pertains to the perception of success and what the external factors, everybody tells us what success is supposed to look like, and then figuring out what it feels like for you. And I am completely with you. Like, my mornings are so precious now when they used to be so stress filled, right? Being able to wake up and knowing that, yeah, I've got a call later today or here, this or that, but my morning is mine. I can make my tea, I can go on my run, I can go to the gym, like whatever it is that I need to do, that time belongs to me. It doesn't belong to a company. And again, I realize we say that from a place of privilege because that is our life, but it's also, we've worked toward that. And I think that I love these conversations because they show people that you can work toward that. And that's what I want to put out into the world is, hey, you don't have to do that thing that you've been doing, hating your job, hating your life 5 days a week, enjoying maybe a day and a half. There's more to it than that. And so I love that you have that perspective as well.
And none of that happened overnight
Totally.
for either of us.
Yeah.
And I've never worked harder or longer hours being self-employed.
But you enjoy it, don't you?
I love it. Honestly, I was thinking today, I put out on social media yesterday my speaking lineup for the month of March, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
And if anyone actually looks at the dates, they might see, oh my gosh, she's working every weekend in March. And to me, I feel like how fortunate to be getting and having the privilege of doing the work that I love so much, even if it's on a weekend.
Yeah.
I just think that it's such a privilege, and this is what I wished for and what I wanted, and I've worked really hard for it. And I also this morning got to have a slow morning until 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it's all a trade-off in how you look at it.
Yeah, it is. And I think I just remember, like, my dad used to always say, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. We've all heard some variation of that, right? And it's like, okay, but that sounds great, but how do I learn to love what I do? Or how do I find something that I truly love? And again, like I say that understanding that someone's listening to this and they're going to a shitty job right now. They're not happy with their life and change feels impossible. I think all I'm trying to say and hopefully inspire someone with this conversation is that it doesn't have to feel impossible. There is a bridge to get you to the other side. You just have to be willing to, your point, put in some of the work. Is there anything in this new chapter that you're still working through? And I ask this because I do think there's a misconception that once you finally make these changes and start on the path that's right for you, that all those obstacles fade away. And we both know that they don't. So maybe say more about what you still find yourself reconciling.
All the time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's why they don't say, oh, you went on a healed journey. No, you go on a healing journey because it's constantly happening.
Totally.
You're not evolved, you're evolving.
Yeah.
You're not grown, you're growing. So I think that anybody that thinks that they've got it all figured out, I still work with my business coach. I'm still always looking for ways to improve. I recently hired a publicist. There's all of these things because there's things that I'm not good at. So we still have to, I'm terrible at self-promotion, which is crazy because I come from a sales and marketing background.
Yeah.
I can sell a product.
Yeah.
Because if somebody didn't like it or they didn't want it, it was either the product or the company that they didn't want to do business with. I never took it personally. But when you are the brand and you've developed the content and it's your name, it's still really uncomfortable for me. So I've had to figure out and navigate different ways that make it more approachable for me. But yeah, I think that we're all always growing. I found myself back in another toxic friendship, someone that was in my life that had discarded me. And then when they saw me on TV promoting my book, they circled the drain, came back, and I slowly but surely let them back in. And the same patterns just proved themselves. So I had to unsubscribe from that friendship. So certainly, if we aren't constantly paying attention and doing the work, we will slip back into old patterns. I used to be very reactive. Traffic would stress me out and I would be high strung because I realized now I was living in fight or flight all the time because of the relationships that I was in, and you're always on eggshells and your nervous system is dysregulated. And so I do notice little triggers for myself. And so you just have to pay attention. For me, one of them is if I'm in traffic, I'm like, and I find myself get worked up, I'm like, oh, sis, you haven't meditated in a minute, have you? You better go. You need to go sit and have some, take some deep breaths, have some quiet time. So I think just having that constant awareness is really helpful to catch yourself in old patterns and behaviors because, like you said, change doesn't happen overnight. And it's like a muscle that you have to continually flex and continually work on for that constant improvement.
Yeah, and it is an ongoing journey, right? Like it's a healing journey. I love what you said, like healing as opposed to healed, because I think there's a misconception there sometimes, right? That once you've solved a problem, it's solved forever. And that's not what life is, right? I think you have to adopt the perspective that like life is constant change and constant evolution and constant learning. And so I love that that's your mindset. I want to talk about unsubscribe. You've mentioned it a couple times, but I know that it started as a personal line in the sand or a decision to stop accepting roles and expectations that required you to override yourself. What have you talked to me about the journey there? What has that been like? What do you unsubscribe from?
So much. So unsubscribe is really the filter that I wish I had when I was in that place. So I developed unsubscribe, and it's based on 4 pillars. The name of the book and the name of my signature keynote, which is customizable, and we have a lot of fun customizing it. It's called Unsubscribe: Why Letting Go is the Secret to Getting Ahead.
Ooh, I love that.
I call it a filter to reclaim time, energy, and boundaries at work and in life. So the 4 pillars are manage, swap, mute, and block. Because when I say unsubscribe, sometimes people are like, oh yeah, unsubscribe, remove it, eliminate it, get rid of it. That's not realistic for everything. And so things can be fluid, they can be moving, and not everything is black and white or complete extremes. And so unsubscribe is not about just flippantly walking away from things or burning everything to the ground. It's designed to be a critical thinking skill. It's designed to be actionable and for you to hold yourself accountable when you're making decisions on what you're going to unsubscribe from. So manage is for the things that are important that you can't remove. They're maybe urgent and important. They need attention. You can't eliminate them from your life. But can you manage it in a way that is going to be more effective for you? And I love that we've talked a little bit about relationships and friendships and how we're like, I will unsubscribe, but maybe it's someone that you can't remove from your life. Maybe it's a boss or a coworker or a family member that you're just not quite ready to completely cut the cord with. But can you manage if it's somebody that's just that complete energy vampire? They just suck all of the energy and you dread getting together with them. Do you have to get together with them every month? So you can manage it by frequency, duration, and type. Do you have to see them in person every time? So the type, and how long does it have to last? So you can manage things that work better for you and then pay attention to how you feel. And then swap is, I love swap. And in the book, I have a 2-page spread. Terrible self-promoter. I don't even have a copy of my book next to me. There's a 2-page spread where I give all of these different ideas of swap this for that. I think so often high performers and high achievers can be really hard on themselves. We have these ruminating negative thought loops in our heads, or we feel guilt, or we get stuck in comparison traps. Even little things like, I don't have 60 minutes to work out today, so I might as well not do anything at all. Could you swap it for 15?
Mm-hmm.
Or I can't run, so I might as well not do anything. Could you walk? Or I can't do high intensity interval training right now, so I might as well do nothing. Could you swap it for something more gentle like yoga or Pilates, something that does work for you? So the swap really helps you to replace outdated systems, thought processes, mindsets for something that feels healthier and better right now.
I love swap in particular because I think that there's this, I think of someone, I don't know why my mind goes to alcohol. I apologize to begin with, but I think of someone that's like doing like a dry January, or maybe they have to quit drinking entirely. And I think that like sometimes what's left in the void is what causes you to potentially go back to something. So if you can swap it for something else, and that's probably not the example that you prefer to give, but
no, actually, that is the exact example. I was like, Sean, are you reading my mind? Did you read the book? Have you listened to something? Because I use the example of dry January for the mute pillar.
Okay.
Right.
Oh,
so you take this 31-day mute from alcohol. But I love where your mind went, because then what I always say is the pillars are designed to be able to flow in and out of one another. So at the end of that 31 days, so when I say actionable, accountable, this is what I mean.
Yeah.
At that 31 days, you pay attention to how I feel. Do I maybe want to mute for another month? Or do I want to swap my cocktails for mocktails a certain amount of days a week?
Yeah.
Or do I want to manage my drinking by maybe only drinking on the weekends moving forward? So you can slide in and out of the different pillars. And dry January is a perfect example that I use for mute. And then block is where things go to die. Okay, so block is the things that we are completely eliminating. And that could be alcohol for some people.
Yeah.
For me, it was narcissists. Complete block removal. I will get them out of here.
Toxicity.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not come back.
Yeah.
So this is for the things that no longer serve us, that we are completely eliminating. Another example for me might be corporate, right? Like corporate job. I've moved on, and it's not to say that I can't still, while it no longer works for me today, it doesn't mean that I still can't be grateful for the opportunities, for the experiences that I had at that time.
And the things that it taught you, quite frankly, that enabled you to be where you are now. I think that's how I like to think about it too, where it's like, I don't like to have those lofty, it's, if not for the pain, I wouldn't be here today. But like, it's that. There must be, but I have to ask, are there still moments where you catch yourself falling back into your old patterns or needing to rely on these systems more consciously than not?
All the time.
Yeah. And how do you do that?
I think it's, again, it goes back to that awareness, right? You have to be aware of your patterns to see when you are slipping. You can't just be oblivious and be running on autopilot. I think that's what got me and so many of us in trouble in the first place. And so it is that tuning in, it is that awareness, it is getting to know yourself, spending time with yourself so that you can get to know yourself better, trust yourself more, so that when you see these things slipping in, you can make that conscious decision to go, ooh, I don't want to be acting like that. And I'm very vulnerable and share all of my own experiences. Some of the stories that I share in the new book are ones that I hadn't shared before. A lot of them, my learning lessons that I'm not so proud of, but I wouldn't be where I am today without those lessons learned, and being able to look at those patterns and behavior and realizing, oh, I see now why I did that or why I behaved that way. And here's how I correct course now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's beautiful. I guess looking back, like I don't know if there's maybe a better way to phrase this, but what do you feel like it cost you staying in things that no longer fit? And I guess the real question in there is, what would you say to someone listening about how to know that they've finally paid too much?
Yeah. When you lose yourself.
Yeah.
I say now, like, I am willing to lose anybody, anything, as long as I don't lose myself again. That is the cost. And I see this happen a lot with women in particular. So a lot of my coaching clients where they prioritize their kids and then their spouse and then their friends and the rest of their family. And then I actually do this exercise sometimes in my keynotes. I did it yesterday. And people were like, it hits people hard. I asked them to rank their top 5 most important people in their lives. And they're never on the list.
Wow.
When you are trying to be everything to everybody else, you end up being nothing for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you've lost it. And I see this, like I said, with women, where then the kids go off to college or they leave the house and they don't know their spouse anymore.
Totally.
Because they're so focused on the kids. And then the relationship or the marriage is struggling and they're trying to get to know each other again. But now they're prioritizing that. They're still not prioritizing themselves. And I know a lot of people are like, yeah, but how do I be so selfish? Like, how do I be so selfish? I'm just trying to be selfless by putting everybody else first. And I'm like, that's not being selfish by prioritizing yourself. It's actually being self-full.
Yeah.
And that actually allows you to then be more for those around you. It's a little perspective shift, and it can take a while to get there.
Yeah. I think I hear that a lot too with women. And I think it's really interesting is that like you've lost yourself in your spouse years ago. Right. So like that part was already gone. And so then like to your point, when the kids leave, it's not everything, is gone. I wonder, and this is something that I think about a lot. A lot of us aspire to have a really big life, right? And I think that especially in the corporate world, you mentioned the handbags and the house and the cars and all of that. To what extent do you think you can still want or have a big life and still feel grounded in it? And is that tension that you still navigate, or do you feel like you figured some of that out?
I think for me, I figured some of that out. However, I think it depends on what your identity of having a big life is.
Yeah.
For me, my identity of having a big life is making a big impact, right? Being inspiring to other people. And so if I can be doing that, and of course I have to make a living, right? Yeah. So that comes along with it. But I think it goes back to, I loved where you were going with losing yourself and identities and labels. If you ask somebody, tell me a little bit about yourself, think about how that list often goes. It's, oh, I'm a mom or a dad or a husband or a wife. This is my job title.
Yeah.
This is whatever. But is that what is anyone talking about your job title at your funeral?
Totally.
Think about what you want that legacy to be. Do you want it, how do you want the impact that you've made on the world to look like or to sound like? And then I think that's how we can back into creating a big life for yourself.
Yeah. Amen to that. I guess for someone listening right now, like maybe their body's trying to tell them something, right? Physical symptoms, exhaustion, but maybe their mind isn't ready to hear it yet. What would you want them to know?
Listen, write it down, pay attention, journal it. I think that sometimes we experience these things and then we just gloss over it. And then I think we start to gaslight ourselves and question reality and be like, oh, the shingles on my face wasn't that bad. Or, oh, those constant migraines that I'm having every time I see that person, it's not that big of a deal, right? And so by writing things down, I've worked with this former FBI agent, and he always says the person with the most documentation wins. And it helps you I want you to be the one that wins. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But by writing things down in the moment, it helps you document and go, oh, wait, I experienced this even with the passing of my elderly dog a few years ago. I kept on, he was 16 and a half. And I was like, oh, I just wish he would give me a sign. He had just bit me in the face because he was disoriented, not because of anything mean or anything like that. And I was like, oh, I just wish he would give me a sign. He fell down the stairs. I just wish he would give me a sign. And I started paying attention and documenting all of his ailments and little issues that he was having. And finally, that's what made it apparent to me and allowed me to let go of, man, one of these things isolated might not be that bad, but all of this collectively and me starting to pay attention and create that awareness for myself helped me see that. So writing things down can be really beneficial.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear about your dog. I also said goodbye to my 16 and a half year old dog in December and went through something very similar where you're just like, please tell me. Can you just speak one night and tell me what's going on? And that's really hard. It actually reminds me of the story. I'm going to butcher the story, but it's there's like a flood. And the guy's, God's going to send me a sign. And he sends him like a boat. And he's like, no, I'm waiting for a sign. And then it's finally like there's a helicopter and he's, no, I'm waiting for a sign. And then he dies. And He's, God, what happened? He's, I sent you a boat, a helicopter. And so I think that's just life, right? We're constantly not paying attention to those signs. And so I think there's a really good lesson somewhere in there. When you strip away all the roles that you used to play, do you feel like you finally uncovered who you are underneath all that? And what would you say to someone on a similar trajectory in this moment?
Absolutely. I am there. Probably not without a lot of judgment. And I think that's partly what people struggle with is, oh, what if they judge me? What are other people going to think? So if you're on this journey and you're thinking about this, like getting to the most authentic version of yourself, just do you, because people are going to judge you no matter what. So you might as well let them judge you for being the most best version of you, because only you can be that.
I love that. That's beautiful. What has you hopeful?
What has me hopeful?
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, crazy, call me crazy, but I do still see the good in people. I want to see the best. I love seeing, I know we live in a really divisive time right now, but I live in Minneapolis.
Oh, wow.
And seeing people come together, that gives me hope. Seeing people unite, want to care for one another, want to support one another, that gives me hope in humanity, because that's really what it's all about at the end of the day.
Wow. Ginny, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing your story. Please tell folks listening how they can connect with you and learn more about your work.
So look, I like to keep things simple. Everything is just my name, Ginny Priem, GINNYPRIEM. That's where I am on all the socials, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. That's my website. So if you want to book me to speak or find out more, I also have links to my books there. So if you're interested in grabbing that, I have a free newsletter, all kinds of good stuff. So yeah, just Ginny Priem.
Thanks for spending some time with me today. Choosing to step off autopilot and think differently about your life takes work, and I don't take it lightly that you're here. If today's episode resonated, the best way to support the show is to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And whenever you're ready to go deeper, whether through free worksheets, guided audio reflections, or one-on-one coaching, you can find everything over at thinkoutsideThelines.com. Be well, and I'll catch you next time.